So my lecture was about migrants as agents of institutional and cultural change. What I did, I divided the lecture into three thirds. The first third was an overview of the literature, classifying the different dimensions, the different channels through which migration can impact institutional and cultural change. So that includes the cultural selection of migration. So people who live for mostly cultural, could be political or other types of cultural reasons, which create for political views, for example, that would be called exit in the sense of Hirschman. And mostly looking also at some dynamic channels of cultural transmission, which include assimilation, which include the dissemination of immigrants' culture, which includes the backlash of natives against immigrants' culture, and also what is called social or cultural remittances, meaning the fact that migrants can adopt the beliefs, the values, the norms of their host country and send it back home through their social networks. So that was the first third. Then the second, I presented different papers on cultural selection and on dissemination. I presented a paper of mine looking at how the politically selective immigration out of Germany in the middle of the 19th century, following the failure of the revolution, of the democratic revolution, generated a large, massive exodus of liberal minds, and showing that this input to democracy building was missing and eventually contributed to the rise of Nazism in Germany. Then I summarized and presented a paper by Samuel Bassi and his co-authors on what they call the Confederate diaspora, showing that, looking at another historical context, the context of the emigration of southern whites out of the South and mostly to the west of the United States. And this paper shows that this emigration shaped the institutional design of these western states and counties toward more racial animus, racial inequality and violence, with persistent effects until today. And then finally I dedicated the last third of the lecture to social and cultural remittances, looking at two instances of migrants disseminating either political or demographic fertility norms toward their home regions in a relatively contemporaneous context, that the context of a former Soviet republic called Moldova, which became partly more democratic thanks to these political remittances from Moldovan immigrants to the West, and also looking at more distant past, how immigration to France in the late 19th century contributed to disseminate the fertility transition to the rest of Europe. So this is the bulk of my presentation. The bottom line being that migrants are agents of dissemination of information, of norms, of knowledge, for good or for bad.